in this space, of course. The current director of Action Station, well involved in this campaign of stopping the bill. But of course, you know, we saw Cassie last week outside the Tākina Convention Centre speaking against the Māori wards in local government, that being repealed. We've got Anavili, who is a member of Indigenous Pacific Uprising, or IPU, which is a group of First and Indigenous peoples of the Pacific, dedicated to the nourishment and reforging of their ancient and ancestral ties. We've got Jess, who's from across the ditch in so-called Australia. So g'day. And I'll stop there with the Australian stereotypes. So she's from a group called Democracy in Colour. And so they were actively involved in the organising around the Voice referendum last year. So yeah, her insights into that will be incredibly valuable. And then of course, Kirsty, one of the OG members of ASTA, who's based in Tamaki and a Te Tiriti educator. And so has done many workshops around the country, especially to Asian communities, but not exclusively. So I'm gonna let them introduce themselves and you know, let them share a little bit about themselves. And if you can also share, what made you say yes to this panel? What are you excited to talk about? Cassie, I'll start with you.
Kia ora tātou. Ko papatua nuku kei raro, ko rangi nui kei runga ko ngā tangata ki Wainganui hei Māori ora. Tēnei te mihi ki tō koutou tupuna, ki tō koutou wahi tapu, ki tō koutou whānau hoki, kei te mihi ki a koutou ki ngā kai whakahaere me ngā kai hautu Asian Supporting Tino Rangatiratanga i te whānau. Kia ora tātou. So my name is Cassie, and just want to shout out to the organisers for this week. It takes a lot to put events like this on, and really appreciate your mahi to do that for all of us. My background is that on my father's side, I come from England, Ireland, Scotland, and Italy. On my mother's side, I come from Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Pariraukawa, me Ngāti Koroki, and Ngāti Tuwharitua ki Taupo. And then on my adoptive side, I come from England, well, I don't come from, but my whāngai family come from England and Holland, hence the long multi-syllable Dutch last name. And what else to say? I'm currently working at Action Station, and two of the areas that we're focusing on are the Treaty Principles Bill and also Māori wards as well, which I'll be talking a bit more about. And why I said yes to this is a couple of reasons. So the first reason is as you mentioned, Selvi, the onslaught of attacks on Te Tiriti that's happening right now. You know, alongside of that, there's been a lot of kōrero about how the Treaty Principles Bill was somewhat of a red herring, hearing that quite a lot, particularly within Māori, particularly. And that's getting all the attention, whereas less popular policies that are being rammed through are not getting the same kind of attention, and that's really a worry. So understand that, but at the same time, the way that I see it is that the Treaty Principles Bill is the terrain that political parties and far-right groups like ACT, Hobson's Pledge and the Taxpayers Union want to roll out an active campaign. This is the ground that they're creating to be able to win over the public on the need to so-called rewrite Te Tiriti and ultimately roll back Māori authority. So I think this bill is really important, and I think that for those of us who dream of a Te Tiriti-based future, I think we need to take this moment really seriously and not just kill this bill, but also propel our movements forward for Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And obviously we can't do that alone. You know, I'm a huge fan of ASTA. My experiences over the years have shown that building understanding and solidarity between tangata moana and tauiwi who aren't Pākehā have been some of the most life-giving, rewarding, deep, nourishing relationships when it comes to Indigenous justice that I've experienced. And so for me, taking the time to be with you all here tonight gives back to me, and I think it gives back to the movement as well. So kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Cassie, that was beautiful. Anavili.
Hi everyone, I'm Anavili. I'm Samoan. My parents are from from back home. My mother is from Puapua and Luluwinga, and my dad is from Siumu and Potasi and Saipipi. And so they came here just in time for the dawn raids in the 70s. And that, I guess, from then on and seeing the way our family have kind of grown up and under the state with an understanding of New Zealand's role as a colonizer in Samoa has, I guess, given, a pretty good perspective or ability to see what the way they operate here as well. And so I fully forgot like half the things that I was supposed to say. I'm so sorry. But one of the reasons the main reason I was stoked to be a part of this is because I think, as Cassie was saying, it's an important time. And for our people, I think we kind of had this conversation about Pacific migrant communities, non-Māori Pacific migrant communities being called tangata moana. And I think there's like a nuanced way to use it. I think in the conversation about multiculturalism and the way like ACT and other similar parties and groups have kind of co-opted this term, or like multiculturalism, I think was the word we used for this forum, has been really insidious. And so trying to, I'm stoked to have this conversation across the board with everyone here. But my kind of focus is on how in my communities or Pacific communities who've been a bit like manipulated into having like a unity with the crown and government versus unity with tangata whenua. And I think trying to ground our understanding of justice and justness, as Matua Mona says, is really crucial, I think. So yeah, that's why I was like, oh yeah, I'll jump on. But yeah, good to be here. Thank you so much for organizing. Yeah, that's me.
Oh, kia ora. That was, I think that's what I'm excited to hear from you, Annabelle. Like, I think even as an ASTA member or as an Asian person, I can be, I'm only exposed to as many Asians as I am, and there is actually a lot that unites us, but again, how we're pitted against each other. Yeah, really cool to explore that today. Jess.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jess. I am based in Sydney in so-called Australia on Darug land out in southwest Sydney. My organisation that I'm representing today is Democracy in Colour, which was introduced to ASTA via Cassie at a Palestine Solidarity Conference in Melbourne. So the connections are aligning like this. And I think I'm just so excited to be here to have this conversation with everybody, because we last year had a referendum on the voice, which in so-called Australia, we do not have a treaty with First Nations people. And that was the center of that discussion of what this voice referendum could look like as a stepping stone towards treaty potentially. And so that's what I'm here to talk about, and to also talk about how, the identity of a person of color and being from a migrant or multicultural background has been weaponized by far-right groups, or to even blame migrant communities if we're not progressive enough as well. So, I guess we lose both ways in the eyes of the colonizer. But the reason why I'm here and agreed to the chat is, if there's a threat to Indigenous sovereignty anywhere, like, we all got to band together as people of color to show a united front, because colonization has no borders, or it's rampant. The story and the tactics are the same. And yeah, coming together is the biggest joy as a united group. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, kia ora, Jess. Not that I'll say something up to everyone, but it is shocking how you were saying it before as well, like how just you can look to New Zealand as a standard as well, but there's still a lot of stuff to do and a lot of stuff to move forward from. Okay, Kirsty, sorry.
You can call me anything you want. So
Too many Ks.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Kirsty. I am currently here in Tāmaki, Makaurau, so nei rā taku mana whenua o te rohe nei ara ki a Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, ki ngā hapū, ki ngā iwi o ngā motu nei tēnā ki koutou. Ka ati ki ngā tāngata whenua huri noa I te ao, mai I te awa ki te moana tēnā koutou. No haina oku tipunoi ko Kirsty Fong tōku ingoa. I'm just learning Mandarin, but this is what I've been learning, which is 让我介绍一下我的家族是客家人。当我们移民到各个国家时，我们始终是客人。我在新西兰也是客人。So in Mandarin, I said that my peoples are Hakka peoples. I always get so embarrassed when I speak Mandarin, but my peoples are Hakka peoples. They're internally displaced Northern Han Chinese who fled to southern parts of China, and they are literally given the name guest families, so the guests of the Cantonese people. And I find that really fitting because here in Aotearoa, because of the Tiriti, I get to position myself as manuhiri, as a guest, and I think that that is an honour, but it's also a responsibility. And so right now we find ourselves in a place in which we have to exercise, I think, that responsibility in honouring the treaty, our first immigration document, the thing that has allowed us to be here, the thing that has allowed us to live on these beautiful lands, but we have to do so in right relationship with one another. And like Jess is saying, we're seeing oh no, I've just started just ranting on. This is what happens when you get a bunch of us to talk about this. There is no niceties to start off with. And we're just seeing our struggles as migrants of color get weaponized against this white supremacist, xenophobic, ongoing colonizing state, right? Pitting us against Indigenous peoples, saying that actually, you know, a lot of migrants migrate because of issues of security or wanting stability, and they're saying that actually the treaty, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, undermines all of those things as opposed to it being the foundation of right relationship and us living here together. And so that is what is really getting my goat, which is the absolute weaponizing of the really real struggles that people have. Reasons why people migrate a lot of the time is because of dispossession, is because of imperialism and colonial violence from the same forces or very similar forces, because we know that colonization is a global, historical, ongoing process and project. And also, like Jess said, it's not really that creative, I think. So it's also a really great way for us to get together transnationally. So thank you so much, Cassie. Actually, you are the one who has started all of this. Me, Joanne, Mingzu, and Jess got together and just like had the best conversation. So this is just carrying on from that. Thank you.
Love that. Awesome. Thank you all. I'll stay with you, Kirsty and Cassie as well. And I wondered if you could start us off by, and you both have shared this, but yeah, what is the history of this idea of treaty principles, and yeah, how do you see its use being undermining of Te Tiriti?
Well, first of all, can I just say it's very intimidating talking about treaty anything when there's Dr. Rawiri Taonui staring down the screen, who was literally the first professor of Indigenous studies in this country. So aroha mai for any kōrero I might give that will not give this kaupapa justice, but to keep it quite brief in terms of the treaty principles, I think that, you know, a lot of people often haven't heard of them, and that's for a reason, right? We have an interesting history around the treaty principles, and I think there's a really great E Tangata article that came out just this last Sunday. If you go to E Tangata and you hit their front page, you will see it there, and it's by Ngā Toki Whakarururanga, which includes Jane Kelsey and many other awesome minds. And they had a very clear analysis around the treaty principles, where they talked about how the principles in their first element were actually introduced by Māori. They were driven by Māori MPs in the 70s. And the reason was because the Crown was refusing to recognise Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So I'm going to assume that most people know about a lot of these different texts, but just if you're really new to this, some of the most known texts, the founding texts that we have in Aotearoa for Māori are He Whakaputanga, the Declaration of Independence, which came prior to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and absolutely claimed full, sovereignty and independence at a time when British settlers were coming over and causing a ruckus and being very lawless. And our northern iwi were very, very foresightful, if that's a word, foresightful in terms of considering what it meant to be able to stake a claim and say, actually, this is who we are, and don't mess with that. And also, what I've been taught, at least by people such as the dear late Moana Jackson, is that things like the Declaration of Independence didn't come from nowhere. They happened because our people were traveling around the world in places, especially like Sydney, catching the ships over to Sydney, and many of them were having kōrero with Indigenous people from other countries, and they were hearing about what was going on here and saying, oh yeah, we've got some white fellas, kind of like your white fellas, what's up here, and learning about what they might do, the strategies they might do to be able to look after themselves, but also take themselves forward into the next century. So the Declaration of Independence, right? It's a piece of paper. They found out that, British settlers really respected pieces of paper. So they had one of those. They got themselves a flag, a shipping flag, to be able to, be taken seriously and on the international waters. And 5 years after that, 4 or 5 years after that, came to Tiriti o Waitangi. And as many of you know, you hear a lot about the Treaty of Waitangi and Te Tiriti o Waitangi, but what we know is that the Te Reo version, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, was signed by over 500 rangatira, is internationally recognised in international law. That is the document. However, even after well over 100 years, you had the Crown trying to wriggle their way out of respecting Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And so in the 70s, there are a number of Māori MPs that decided that actually, evoking the idea of principles might be a way to bypass and get around what was obviously the Crown refusing to recognise their obligations under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. However, what ended up happening is that the Crown began to co-opt this idea of principles. Became very convenient to talk about principles, these kind of abstract notions, rather than what the actual text says in Te Tiriti o Waitangi in the Te Reo version, which, as we know, is that Māori did not cede sovereignty. So it became convenient to talk about these principles, and over the years, these got more and more diluted down. And you might have heard some of them every now and then. The most kind of diluted version, I think, is the 3 Ps: partnership, protection, and participation. And this really is just so far from what Te Tiriti o Waitangi really talked about and what was agreed to, but this was convenient and useful at the time for the Crown, who were ultimately evading their obligations. So interestingly, if you talk to most Te Tiriti experts, I don't know many Māori Te Tiriti experts who love the treaty principles in the first place. They see them as this dilution, a watering down. The most generous read is that they're a bridging between the Treaty of Waitangi, the English version, and Te Tiriti, the Te Reo version, that it's some kind of marriage or bridging between the two. But that's really the most generous reading that I hear of the treaty principles. Otherwise, what you will hear Māori say is respect Te Tiriti o Waitangi, respect Te Whakaputanga. However, this does not matter to David Seymour or the ACT Party, because the way that I see it, at least, is the treaty principles are a very convenient vehicle for them to be able to erode tino rangatiratanga for Māori. And so that's where you kind of get into the space of actually, even if there is intention around the principles that is useful in law and is useful in our government, what is really happening here is that that is being dishonestly and disingenuously used to push a political agenda. I don't know if you want to add to that, Kirsty, because you're an actual Te Tiriti educator and might have more to share on that whakaaro.
No, I think you summed it up so perfectly. I just want to say that I think that the Treaty Principles Bill is essentially a misnomer. And I think it's backed people into a corner, te tiriti educators and, you know, people who are going out in the streets and saying toitu te tiriti. People really want to honour the treaty, which is really amazing. And this is what we want. But I think we've come to a point where people are saying, let's protect the principles. And so maybe this is me answering that question, why am I here today? Which is just, I feel a lot of, well, there's a lot of confusion because we have a population that is ignorant by design also, right? We weren't taught about te tiriti, we weren't taught about an accurate history of our country and our place in it at school. Also, and it's a failure of the immigration system. We've got people coming in not understanding the history of the place and our place in it. And therefore, I think it's really ripe for kind of mis and disinformation to be spread and to be seeded. And this is, I think, the consequence that we're seeing right now. And so, yeah, like Cassie is saying, I think we all know that the end goal is to honour te tiriti. It's really quite a simple document. It's 4 articles plus a preamble. It is really clear, but I think the government does not want to look at it, does not want to admit that it actually can comprehend what it says, because if they do so, then it means that their legitimacy would be questioned, right? And so, yeah, I mean, you've got lots of te tiriti educators that just basically say throw the principles in the bin, and we have been doing so for a really long time. Like Cassie said, I think law professors would have a better handle on this, but it's also important, I think, in the legislative space. We're seeing you know, new Waitangi tribunal hearings come out with new principles, like the Te Paparahi o Te Raki claim has come out with tino rangatiratanga and kāwanatanga, and like all of these mana motuhake, really nice things, which should not be determined by the courts, but this is where we are now. So I hear Mona Jackson's incrementalism and stasis at the back of my mind too, but I think maybe it's both and in this case. So I'm not really sure what I just rambled on, except to say that, yes, Cassie, I agree with you. It is really important for us to have an accurate understanding of the history of our country. And this is why we've got te tiriti educators essentially addressing the failures of our education system. But I think it's important as part of a conscientization process. We can't get to mātiki mai, we can't get to constitutional transformation if we don't understand he whakaputanga, if we don't understand te tiriti, and if we can't critically analyse, I think, where we are right now. And I think where we are right now is also a really hopeful time, because people can't be complacent. I think it's right up in your face. And so it is also maybe a time of great promise. Did I answer the question?
You know what? You've answered many questions actually, Kirsty. So, but I think like it was so good to hear the history actually, because again, as Kirsty mentioned, we don't even know where the 3Ps have come from according to our, if we go back to when, if you did school in New Zealand like I did, I did not know that stuff. And I think you make a really good point as well, like how this bill kind of forces us to protect what is, a watered down version of what the treaty is about. And I think this government is doing that in a lot of spaces. I work with them in the Early Childhood Union, right? And like that's exactly what this government is trying to do. The teachers are just trying to protect basic health and safety practices so that children don't die. And so this is what's happening in the spaces as well. So we can't actually move forward. I don't know, maybe Annavili, if you could come in here as well, but if you could, maybe Cassie, just sort of condense, or maybe like a quick, like, what is this bill hoping to achieve? And if you three could, share some of the efforts that are going on currently to kill it. One of your faves, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So most people will know that this bill is the brainchild of David Seymour and the ACT Party. I think that it goes bigger than him, but certainly he's spearheading it. And the whole purpose of it is that he wants to be able to force a referendum on the role of te tiriti in our country. And while the draft bill hasn't been released, as he keeps reminding us, we know from their propaganda website what's probably going to be in it. And essentially, it's about changing the treaty principles to 3 articles that don't actually bear any resemblance to the original Te Tiriti. The Te Reo translators have already spoken loud and clear about that. And instead to place Act's neoliberal values at the forefront instead. So and I think what's most important is that this proposed replacement removes any reference to Māori, removes the guarantee of tino rangatiratanga or political authority that is in Te Tiriti, and making it this idea, this misnomer, I think is the word of the day, about this is about everyone and all New Zealanders, and really bringing this idea of that it's about everyone, when really what it's doing is removing as many rights as possible from Māori. So the bill is particularly insidious for too many reasons to name. But I think some of the reasons include that it distorts and misrepresents what Te Tiriti means. Very intentionally, it distorts it. The process for creating it is based on the political ideology of one party and one man. It's not about working and even aligned with the existing treaty principles if they believed in them. It's deliberately inciting racist tropes in order to turn especially Pākehā against Māori. And ultimately, Seymour was treating it as a campaign to win rather than a good faith conversation about a constitutional framework, which, as Kirsty says, Māori have been wanting to have a kōrero about our constitutional arrangements. We've wanted to do that. But this is not a good faith kōrero about that. That's not what this is. This is a deliberate, disingenuous attempt to be able to erode our rights. So, and that being said, I don't want to fully take the other 2 parties off the hook, because the truth is that even though ACT is driving this bill, we have 2 parties who have essentially, as was said at the Koroneihana, thrown Māori under the bus and run us over in order to be able to attain political power. They know the risks of this bill. They know that it's unpopular, but they have sided with ACT and written this coalition agreement to be able to continue their ability to be able to stay in power. Now, the interesting part is that almost everyone knows that this is a political hot potato. It's growingly known that this is an ideological project driven by mostly one man on the far right. It's already causing problems within the coalition if you read the news, because National and New Zealand First are trying to wriggle their way away from it. When I emailed Christopher Luxon with over 230 community organisations against it, the first thing that his EA said to me was, "Oh no, this isn't anything to do with Luxon. I'm going to hand this over to David Seymour's office. You're going to want to talk to David Seymour." And I was like, "No, we want to talk to the Prime Minister, because actually this is happening on his watch." So what you're seeing is people, political parties try to distance themselves from it in the coalition, because they know that it's not right. They know that it's about eroding those rights and doing it in a very dishonest way. So I guess just to name as well, like the idea that this is an honest debate is flawed. It's not an honest debate. I think the best that we can get from this, as Kirsty says, is this opening. I think Tēnā Ngāta talks about it as an opening more than an opportunity to be able to have the kōrero about Te Tiriti that Māori have been wanting to have. The problem is that it is being laid down on the terrain that a deliberately white supremacist organisation wants to set up so that they can win as many people over as possible. So it's dangerous. It's dangerous because it opens up that debate, which is not on fair, good faith, honest, genuine grounds, and it's ripe for disinformation, misinformation, and just straight up racism, as we're already seeing.
No, I appreciate that. And so I guess if maybe Anna Vili, if I could ask you, like, as Cassie mentioned, this is a chance to have that conversation with our communities. I just wanted to hear from you, and like, how are you having that conversation, now or before, or
I feel like both Cassie and Kirsty's breakdowns are really like comprehensive, and I'm just trying to like wrap my thoughts around it, to be honest. So I think the main thing that has leapt out to me, I can't speak from the places they're coming from, but from what I've seen of how, I can't say the whole Pacific community, but Pacific communities have taken this on. Something that Kirsty pointed to is like their propaganda site, right, of what the principles are. On like face value, anyone who doesn't have that critical understanding of Te Tiriti or even of like crown oppression and colonization of Māori, it looks like a good thing. Like it is really, I find it really difficult to reconcile that, I think, for a lot of our people who come here with having seen New Zealand as a current or former colonizer, that this is like the opportunity to mend the harms that they've done to us. And because we come with this like mentality, we end up looking at, when we see Māori rise up against it and say this is violating our rights, or like this is like a continuation of violence against us. When you put a bright pink website with pretty words and pretty fonts and things that say this is about all of us being here together, it's painful and freaking tiring. But I think one of the ways I look at it and how we're trying to have this conversation is to set it up as like multiple tiers of a bigger problem. If we look at I think one thing is identifying what it is, what our end goals are, because sometimes I think there's a tendency to come into this as like migrant people and almost be a bit like savory, like oh, we want to honor you guys and treasure you and all that stuff, and there's not, I think it's really important to interrogate like what it is that we want. And so if we look at honoring Te Tiriti as not like the final thing, but as like a step to the liberation of Māori, of tangata whenua, it is a step to a bigger goal, which is tied to the shared goal of liberation for all of us. And so when we can frame that and identify that, I think it makes prepares the soil to then start looking at how the Crown operates. I think the tactics of the Crown, because back to the points that Kirsty and Cassie brought up, it's not just ACT. It's not even just a coalition. There's been like a lot of news about Chloe Swarbrick from the Greens questioning, do you think Māori ceded sovereignty? And what a freaking waste of time. Like that, to kind of congratulate that line of questioning, she still was an agent of the Crown. And I think this thing of like understanding how government works, so we can strategize within those things to get us further, if that makes sense. Please tell me if I'm not making sense, by the way. But these things are strategies. But to end with just that we don't want the coalition, we want other parties who actually still have the same incentives when it comes to the oppression of Māori, still are representations of the Crown. There is no world, I think, where the Crown is going to turn around and say, no, we honor tangata whenua, we honor mana whenua, we honor these things. And so I think, for me, I feel like it is crucial to have and to bury and nurture a real distrust based on our understandings and our wisdom of generations past, a distrust in the Crown. I'm very wary of our strategies and conversations kind of ending with like a dependence or a trust or a unity in their system. I don't need to explain it to these guys here that we're already on the same page, but I do want to not skip ahead, because I can definitely say for the majority of our people that nuance isn't there yet. There's definitely some, but we have freaking huge populations on the far right who have been co-opted by this exact like thing. And so we do kind of have to, for me anyway, and for my where I am seeing, have to kind of step back to reassess our place, not just in Aotearoa, but our place in relationship to the Crown, and the place we want to have in relationship to Māori as just as people, you know. But yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I think there's like I think that could be like a whole conversation in itself as well. And like, I think that's something we should keep talking about. Like, what is the end goal? And in that journey, what is the spill? What does that represent? And like, we can't just, if we do kill it, hopefully we will through organizing and strength and whatever, but like, that can't be the end. And
Yeah. I think
yeah,
there are real like big things as well. Sorry to coming off whenever you need. But I think there are things where I don't think it's a coincidence that this treaty principles bill has come at the same time as cutting like benefits, you know, that traffic light system that has been put forward. And so this thing of like, I love what Anjum has just put in the chat, that it relies on community, right? Like that's where the power is in the people. But to undercut our ability as a people to just live is such a crucial thing. And we've seen that again, seen that with how the Crown treated Māori, how they've treated every place they've freaking like destroyed or tried to. Apologies for my language. That we've seen this in different forms, but at every step it's crucial to undercut our ability to live and organize with people and to build those communities and sustain them. And so we're dealing with, I think when it comes to the treaty principles, not only is this a like political tennis or whatever, hot potato, it serves as like, as a destructive thing for going forward.
That's so true. And like making sure we connect the dots and like have the ability to zoom out as well and see what else is happening at the same time. And I think you raise a good point about like being attacked on every front is being attacked on the ability to like live and exist and even build community, because I know we use the word community a lot, especially in these spaces, but I sometimes even struggle to be like, what is my community beyond my mum and my dad? And but yeah, that's like deliberate as well, right? I'm gonna be the meanie that looks at the time all the time, but Jess, I wanted to call to you now because Anna Billy brought up a lot about these propaganda and like the multi-level discussions that we have to have with our own communities. Do you want to share, a little bit about what the voice referendum was about, how you see its relevance within our conversation today, and any lessons or anything? I'll let you have some time.
Yeah, like everything that's everyone's been saying is it's so resonating with everything that happened with the voice referendum in at the end of last year, where the voice referendum came out of the reconciliation era within so-called Australia of trying to bridge non-Indigenous and Indigenous folks. And this came out of, essentially the referendum was a yes or no vote on whether to alter our constitution to enshrine a voice to Parliament. So this voice would have embodied or involved First Nations communities to talk about issues that affect them in Parliament, almost like an advisory body. And the far right media, the just general media class, just your everyday average person got swept up in a lot of racist rhetoric. And it became, like was mentioned by Cassie, a hot potato debate rather than something that was meant to be genuine, taking on a generous invitation from First Nations folks who created this voice referendum, or it was a process that was created, and kind of left it hung to dry. So there was like a government-funded campaign to inform and educate people about what this referendum is, so that everyone could come to the table with an informed vote. But it's left a lot of gaps with migrant communities, which then allowed like this growing virus of far-right groups coming in and co-opting some of that language and taking advantage of the fact that there are tiers to this understanding of colonization and to the history of Australia that hasn't really improved much since I was in school. And the complication and also the tricky thing about the voice referendum that allowed so much like alt-right conservative talking points to grow is that in Australia, we have the Murdoch media who love to pit groups against each other, including First Nations communities. So folks who were sitting on a spectrum of ideas of a progressive sovereign no vote all the way to a yes vote were pitted against each other and almost in a violent way, not allowed to have a different opinion. And so the same idea of generalizing the experiences of multicultural communities, the same thing was happening with First Nations communities. And so you would often see the media class and just, groups of people reading Channel 10, Channel 7, just our regular news channels, just repeating things that were not rooted in any truth whatsoever. So things like, if you vote yes to an advisory body, your house will get taken away because they would want land back, and land back is this terrible thing, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was, a political flash in the pan moment, because there was no genuine discussion by government to genuinely push this forward. And it kind of fell on grassroots communities, it fell on service providers, it fell on people who cared about treaty to take on the load. And so with Democracy in Colour, we are an organisation run by and for people of colour, and we sought advice and consultation from First Nations organisations that we have relationships with to use some of their messaging on how to talk about this issue from a strength-based place, and in a place that could set the soil, set the scene for treaty. So this was a yes and messaging that was very different from the government's campaign, which didn't give much faith or hope in people who wanted to vote yes that a treaty discussion would come out. But the messaging that we followed by First Nations communities called Passing the Message Stick was a conversation about beyond this vote. So true solidarity work and active decolonisation would mean whatever you vote at the end of the day, we need you to continue on for treaty, because this is not the end of the road. We hope this is the beginning of a conversation, because it was very crazy to hear the misinformation that was coming out from all different angles. And especially the situation in so-called Australia is that migrant or multicultural communities tend to get blamed for when things don't work out the way it should. So when, we tend to be viewed as people who had, trauma and taken conservative traditions or cultures to their new home country, and no longer want to join the bandwagon of like progressive thought. So that was something that really scared us, because there was an election coming, and we knew this was a political moment. And even though we try not to play into these political moments and these political things, we knew that this would have a lasting impact for the communities that we're a part of, especially since they tend to treat migrant communities as the same. So, like what type of messaging or what type of outreach for the Vietnamese community, which I'm a part of, would look entirely different for the Korean community or the Pacific Islander community, but it was just like flattened. The experiences were flattened, and obviously it's a recipe for disaster, because you're not meeting anyone where they're at, and therefore it's so much harder to do the work that you need to do, especially if we're coming from a position of yes and, which meant meeting people from all different positions of, we have First Nations, like there is an Indigenous community, from all the way to colonization. So it was a lot of different forms of and different types of conversations that were being had, and it just didn't help when misinformation was just the counterforce. So you would, where at points you'd feel like you're taking 3 steps forward in a conversation, and then you'll take 10 back, because fear of losing your home, which was not based on anything, became one of the highlighting points. And also the far right had a really good slogan in Australia called "If you don't know, vote no," which was a killer. Like, it was amazing, because there are people that, would be on the fence and had really good sentiment, but as soon as they heard that, that was enough for them to change their mind right at the ballot box. There are too many instances where I'd have a conversation with someone and they would be so happy, they would understand, they'd be like, yeah, this would, yes, and then they'll come out of the voting booth and say, sorry, someone got me just before, and they really compelled me to vote no, because I guess we don't know. It was just very compelling. I think there was something else you asked, but I can't remember now.
It's okay. I think that I completely forgot about that slogan. Now you've reminded me, and it's actually quite terrifying, because we could see that exactly. Like, they don't even have to like create a new playbook, as they don't, as the right don't. Hey, I think, do you maybe just want to share, like, you talked a little bit about the misinformation already, like land back equals your home is gone. What other disinformation did you see that has stuck with you a year on, that you probably still see now, but yeah?
Oh, that's a very good one. They love to, that First Nations communities are so divided on this issue, because again, I see groups as monoliths. They don't recognize that, we can have different opinions, but hey, we can still come together. But it's just
God
like
forbid.
so mind-blowing. God forbid. But land back has stuck the most. I think maybe with the housing crisis and just all these things that compound on each other, it's very easy to see a slogan of land back, and for most of us who understand the significance of that, it looks completely different. And that kind of goes in the same way of how we talked about colonization. It's tricky when you're going between different languages. Like, I struggled to find the right words in Vietnamese, and the same with some of the other members of the group trying to translate it in Tagalog, for instance. But I think the one thing that was like, it sounds all doom and gloom. There was a no vote at the end, was the final count. But something that was a little bit empowering was the fact that when we were able to connect the stories of, our own experiences of colonization or imperialism, when it does stick, like, it's very tangible, and that this person has now is going to go on and talk about it to somebody else, and they're far and few, but when they happen, you're like, this is why I do this.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to hold on to that.
Yeah.
Anna, Vili, and Kirsty, did you want to add anything or share any disinformation you're hearing here in Aotearoa around this bill already?
I'm quite keen to not give it any more airtime, honestly. But
Great. Cool.
But something I did want to address, like, I think, the government plays on that fear of like losing your home, and so that land back, or like, land back means you lose your home. I do really want our communities to be able to drive our movements as for tino rangatiratanga, like, unconditionally. I think there's and there are a lot of Samoan people who are in government positions, right, who take government jobs, and a lot of their belief and the mentality that has kind of put that in is like to safeguard and protect the wealth of like future generations. Like, we'll accept struggle, we'll accept hard work with the guarantee that our children or grandchildren will be safe and protected here. And so that, I trying to have a real commitment to tino rangatiratanga. If Māori decide like you need to go back home, then sure, like, Gigi. I think I think it can be really dangerous to use that as our negotiating thing when it comes to talking to our communities, because then when that promise, it's like that just should not even be a part of the equation. Like that's something that they use, but to reframe for our people that it's not Maori who oppress us. Like it's not Maori who are, it's not hapu and marae that are that take our freedoms away. You know, like it's not, these are not the communities that are infringing on our like human rights and stuff.
Yeah.
And so that thing of like not trying to meet the colonizer at the colonizer's messaging actually be, you guys don't even speak our language. Let me reframe for my people what we're actually dealing with, because that is the, you know, I think that thing, to be committed regardless of what might happen, whatever decision may be made, to understand even what freedom and liberation means for us, and to localize that, to have our own understandings of what tino rangatiratanga means, mana motu hake. They're not the English reference of self-determination, of sovereignty, right? Like, and so again, like building and nurturing a relationship with tangata whenua is also understanding their references and making the real effort to be like, we're not just going for a Crown or United Nations definition of freedom or a far right government's definition of freedom. We are looking to this greater thing that really I do think humans have we have a human understanding of what it is to be subjugated or otherwise. And so this is where whatever threat the colonizer throws at us. Sorry, this is getting into the meanest ramble, so I will let me cut myself before I take up all the time.
Oh gosh, no, I could listen to you for ages. Actually, I think we need to book in another time because we're already at 8 o'clock, and I'll give everyone you know, time to share what maybe you haven't been able to share so far, and maybe touch on I'm listening to what you're saying, Annabelle, not to give misinformation any more time, but I think we came around this idea, and Esther has been trying to do a little bit more work around this, which is because multiculturalism is like the key phrase that I think we're going to see a lot of, and multiculturalism, belonging. Maybe if everyone could sort of share when you hear that word, why is it a red flag, and like what you kind of want us to take. So if I go home and share it with a friend or whatever, what should I relay? And then on the other side of that, if we could share, end on a good note, maybe yeah, what's your which question do I want to take? What do you hope for out of this conversation, out of this movement, and this point in that journey towards liberation and tino rangatiratanga? What do you hope we come out of this with? Which you've all touched on in various ways, so we'll just end on that. Maybe I'll go Jess, Annabelle, Cassie, and then Kirsty. Sorry, Kirsty, I know we haven't heard you for a wee while, but I think I'll close with you as an ASTA member. Is that okay? Jess.
Instantly top part, multiculturalism for who? Who you're defining it for, what, like who's talking about it, because all I understand it in this context is with a very heavy white supremacist lens. And even in the best of time, you use like the term multiculturalism as you love me for my food and my culture, but not for when power or equality and justice comes to the table. Answer that question for me first, and maybe we'll talk about what multiculturalism looks like, especially if you're white supremacist energy. And something that forward thinking, I think, was the last part. Just a whole world reckoning of Indigenous sovereignty, self-determination, rewrite that whole narrative for me, because something that I think about is, my parents, I'm second generation, but my parents moved here as boat people, and something that I think about in their experience of assimilation and but also just trying to reconnect back to culture. I think that would look so different if the world was remained true to Indigenous culture, and maybe that journey would not have been so difficult. And the process of understanding language and understanding my own culture in the context of a bigger story will look very different and would not have been so sad. So a world of reckoning of love, Indigenous culture, because isn't that why we're all here? Because that's all we care about, and what keeps it going. And knowing that you guys are doing that in Aotearoa is very cup filling for the movement here. So the movement in so-called Australia does not end or start here. We're all parts of the same story of each other, right? So yeah, big love is what I'm feeling.
Oh, I love that. Well, I fully agree. I'm happy to leave it with that. I'll just add, I think someone said, like, we don't always know who our community is, or have to question, like, if all you can think of is your parents or your friend or, Kirsty's ex-neighbor, let that be the start. I think the feeding into community doesn't have to be we gather hundreds and thousands of people overnight. It's, in the little stuff. And that is, for me, is really hopeful that we can pretty much fail. This thing can go through, even in November, it can go through by government. It will not be the end. That's not it might make things harder, but in doing that little stuff of, I don't know, hanging out, giving your friends a call, and affirming each other is a really easy, I was gonna say easy, it's not always easy, but it's a good step. All feeds into the bigger vision. That's me, thanks.
Kia ora tātou. I wanted to start off by just saying what I think most people already know here, and what we're talking around is that, what the far right want is their voice to be heard over and over again, because messaging science tells us that if you hear something 7 times, it will start to stick as truth. And that's why when Australians are listening to their TV news repeat things over and over again, then our behavioral psychology will just start to be like, yes, that is what is true. That's what we do. And so I think what's worrying is that, for example, the Ag Party, the media will just reprint his press releases. It will be a news article, and it will be all of the Ag Party and David Seymour's spin. All of it will just be, it'll be a whole news article that is just doing the work for him. And I think that what they want to do is they want to win the public over to their ideas. That's the purpose. And if they say it enough and sound as reasonable as possible, then they will be able to shift, not probably the people in this room, but certainly our families and our friends and some of our loved ones, and maybe some of our not loved ones, over to closer to their position. So when the time comes that, say, they do get a referendum, it is easy to prime everyone to then vote against Indigenous rights, because all of that work has already been done. So that's what's going on. And I do really want to say that I think one of the most dangerous things is that we cede the ground to them, that we just allow them to do exactly as they're doing, and not in some way, not fight back isn't the right word, but to, as you mentioned, Jess, like to bring in what we know, what you said, Anivili, like to bring in our frameworks, to like bring some truth and some puno and some tika to this. And I think we can't just concede the ground and be like, oh, well, this is too hard, or I'm not even going to weigh in because David Seymour's not worth it. Because it's not actually about David Seymour, it's about our people. It's about our people, it's about our communities, it's about Indigenous people everywhere. And so I think we need to wade in, and we need to get good at telling the story about why this matters to us. Like, why are you here? Why does this matter to you? Why are you spending your Tuesday night here? And for me, I know what matters to me is that I want my family to live long lives. I want my family to not die at least 7 years earlier than settlers who came here. I want them to see their grandchildren and spend their time with their grandchildren for as long as they possibly can. And in order to do that, Māori need to be able to make decisions about our lives and the things that affect us. And that's what's being attacked. And so I think we need to get good about weighing into the conversation and having those conversations, even though they're hard, and taking them to a different place, as we've been talking about. I just want to end on one last thing, is that, you know, we had a question about what we're up to, and I do want to say that there's lots of rōpū who are looking at this and wanting to do things around this, and one of those things is having those conversations. I do also want to say that as Action Station, one of the things that we're focusing on is we want to give everyday people a chance to be able to weigh in on this, like not feel like you have to be a Te Tiriti expert to have a say. You know, lots of us just aren't that, and that's fine. And so next week we will be launching a campaign called Together for Te Tiriti. And we came up with that idea from Larissa Baldwin, Jess, who you'll probably know, who's an Aboriginal leader over in Australia, who said straight up, claim your values. Claim your values. Over in Australia, they claimed unity really early on. And they were like, oh, we're all on the same side. We're all together. We're not divisive. We're just chums. We're all goods over here hating on Indigenous people. And yet over here, kotahitanga is already like thriving and blossoming and flourishing. And I think what we need to be saying is that the majority of people believe Te Tiriti is good. The majority of people see that it's a generous invitation that Māori offered for people to come over and set up their own homes, their sense of belonging, and even their own government. We just need to make sure that that keeps coming to the forefront. Kia ora.
I want that to be the last word.
All right.
Maybe, okay. I have lots of things to say, like we all do, but I think also just emphasizing our solidarities, right? Like this Treaty Principles Bill, yes, it's a 2023-2024 situation, but lots and lots of different like anti-Māori, a suite of anti-Māori acts and policies and legislations are being pushed through, have always been pushed through for 184 years, because the MO of this colonial government is denying Hapu and iwi rightful political power. And so we need to look past our parliamentary system, and we also really need to interrogate the centrality of the Crown. If we understand that Te Tiriti just allowed the British governor one chair alongside rangatira representing their hapu, independent political nations, then they also shouldn't speak for us. They shouldn't speak for migrants of colour. They shouldn't be speaking for people who also have fled because of violent colonial occupations, who have come wanting, sorry, I'm getting real angry, but have wanted to be in rightful relationship with people. People know what it is like to be in a guest host relationship. I come to your house, and if you ask me to take off my shoes, I do. I do not come and change your locks, and I do not bring my whole family in. I think a lot of people understand this, and I am really heartened to see on a day-to-day basis working with newer migrants who come in and say, oh yeah, this is, of course, and I'm really pissed off because I am here as an asylum seeker, and I was told that this is God's own. I was told that you guys have really great race relations, that we hear about the haka, you know, like people really care about te reo Māori, people really care about the Indigenous peoples of this land, because it is the prime, it's the first cultural export. We saw this at the Olympics. Sorry. Don't give me the last word. And I just think that also really believing in our multitudes, you know, like really believing and taking back our agency as peoples, that we refuse to be subjugated by this white supremacist government, that we should be here in our fullness, because that is what Te Tiriti allowed, like a mutually beneficial, reciprocal relationship with each other, with our fullness, so that we can be, you know, big and gorgeous and thriving. And so they are denying us this opportunity to like have a beautiful world where we can hear birds singing, where we can also be in right relationship upon agreed values as laid out in Mātike Mai, in the ways that we have made relationships since actually the beginning of time. There are so many different oral histories that Dr. Mona Jackson and many other people have shared of migrant Māori solidarities. right? And that we're enacting them as we speak here. Also, we're seeing the rising tide of people standing in solidarity with Indigenous struggles worldwide. Kanaki, Sudan, Palestine, Taiwan, Tibet, Hawaii, everywhere. So actually, I think this is a really crucial moment that we have to also marry up all of those different struggles, because we're a rising tide who cannot be stopped. And if they think that they are the representative voice of the peoples, then they have to listen to the voice of the people who will not be drowned out. Okay, kia ora.
Kia ora, Kirsty. I'm so glad you kept going after you stopped yourself. And I think, oh, I'm just so glad this is recorded so we can listen back to this, because yeah, and we definitely need to have another one of these discussions in Korero. So, okay, we're actually not done yet. It's time for breakout rooms, can't have a Zoom without a breakout room. So the way we're going to do the breakout rooms though is choose whatever group. It's choose your path, like those goosebump stories. So we've got a range of breakout groups. If you wanted to sort of stick with the discussion that one of these awesome panelists has started, go for it. If you're and then we've also done it sort of prescriptively as well. So like if you're Tamaki based or Wellington, and then the other one was the rest of the country based, and Pākehā, Waities, if you're on this call and you want to talk amongst yourselves in a group, that's also an option. Asians. So the plan for the breakout room was going to be like a little bit more prescriptive, but I might just go off the plan and say we can just use the next 7 to 9 minutes to maybe just like have a chance to reflect on what you've heard, what has stuck with you, and what's an action that you want to take. Like that could be, as many of the panelists have said, like having a discussion or having a chat with your friend or your family member, or it's hosting another one of these discussions, or it's having a potluck, like anything. Quality over quantity, just have that discussion and then maybe report back, put it in the chat, your ideas afterwards, and then we'll try wrap up at the time of 8:30.